want each of you to spend the first couple minutes talking about your entrepreneurial journey. As entrepreneurs, as investors, Alexandre, we've talked about you being an executive entrepreneur, or what I call an intrapreneur, just to get a sense of the different ways people are getting involved in this revolution. So Dave, why don't we start with you?
Thanks. I don't know if we have time for my complete entrepreneurial journey, but let's just say...
The short version.
Yeah. So I've spent a little over 20 years in Silicon Valley, mostly after getting out of college on the East Coast. I started out as an engineer, was kind of a small-time entrepreneur, had a very desperate and crazy existence running an e-commerce and internet consulting company. We had a small acquisition around 98. Spent a few years at PayPal, and then started doing angel investing around 2004 when I was leaving PayPal. And then had some fortunate opportunities with Mint and SlideShare and a few others. After that, sort of joined Founders Fund, which is a venture capital fund run by Peter Thiel, previously also Sean Parker in Silicon Valley, and had the opportunity to help the Facebook fund get off the ground for a little bit in 2009. And then started 500 Startups, which I think of as my own startup, although we're a VC fund. I still think of myself as an entrepreneur in the financial services area about 3 years ago. And we've had all kinds of struggles and challenges, but recently are now up to about 20 people, have about 475 investments across 30 countries.
475 investments across 30 countries. Amazing. Okay, Alexandra, that was great. Quick, your journey.
Good. Okay, so I'm Brazilian, and I found out during my career that I think I like the dangerousness of a new job or doing something different when I was relatively young, and I had a great job. I was at HBO at that time. I had an offer to go to Miami and spend some time in Miami with a great job, driving a nice car, and then came this company called Google that I had no idea what Google was. That was back in 2004, end of 2004, beginning of 2005. And then Google came and said, "Listen, we're looking for someone to open the office in Brazil." And I said, "Well, between this Google company and HBO, going to Miami, maybe maybe HBO is much better." But then I discussed with my wife and I decided to try Google. So my boss at HBO called me and said, "Listen, can you come to New York? Because I want to talk to you. Really, I don't want you to leave the company." I went to New York, and then I decided to connect with some friends, from the US. And I said, "Listen, this crazy company, Google, is calling me." I said, "What, Google? Well, this is a great company. It's great. It's growing a lot." So I said, "You know what? I mean, between driving a nice car and just growing my belly in Miami, working for HBO or going to Google, I said, let me try this company." And then we started, Google since the very first beginning. I mean, there was nobody in Brazil, nobody in Latin America. It was a great job, just like hiring people, finding people, coming and discussing a totally new business model in a country like Brazil, just going to the government, talking to, just looking into those different things. Then Google became a big company, and I had 8 countries. I had people, working in different countries in Latin America. We had almost 500 people. And, this company, Facebook, came and said, "Listen, would you like to, come and bring Facebook to Brazil and build Facebook in Latin America?" And I said, "Yeah." And I think, that's what I like. I like to build things. And I decided to leave this big organization that was Google to start Facebook 2 years ago in my house. Just to give an idea, when I joined Facebook, we had 12 million users, 12 milhões de usuários in Brazil, and now we have 67 million users. So we're talking about almost 55 million new users since I joined Facebook back in 2011. So that's pretty much what that's what I call the entrepreneur executive. I mean, I'm not building a small company, but I like very much to bring those companies and help them to grow and maybe become an iconic brand as we have now in Brazil.
Hernan.
So in 1999, when I was younger, and Linda was just a little child, we started in Mercado Libre. Marcos Galperin had the idea. Unfortunately, as Linda said, I was crazy enough to get together with him, and we decided to roll out what at the time was the eBay model throughout Latin America. Obviously, the company evolved a lot from those days. We went public in 2007. Now I realize that a big part of our success was related to the fact that during 2001 to 2004, we were able to buy all of Google's traffic in Latin America just by a penny, and then someone came in and said, no, we need to create other pricing mechanisms.
My very first client, Mercado Libre.
So certainly we took advantage that Alexander wasn't there for a long while, and the company evolved. Obviously, we went through lots of great times and not so good times. In those years at the beginning, there were no internet users. It was really difficult to assume that you were going to build a sustainable company. But I think we kept on focusing ourselves, focusing the organization on the long run, on what we wanted to accomplish, and things play out really well. The company is still doing very well. I left Mercado Libre in 2011, but the company has an executive team that is probably better than the one they had when I was there. And I jumped into venture backing. We founded together with Nicolas Sekasi, who was also the CFO of Mercado Libre, Kasek Ventures. It's a venture capital fund that invests in companies throughout Latin America. So far we've done 20 investments, 14 of those in Brazil.
Great. So we talk a lot about startups, but I think that a phrase that's taken hold here and that Endeavor's seen a lot is what happens at the scale-up phase. After companies have gotten started, but when they hit these roadblocks, these inflection points. And one of the things that comes up is the culture that you set very early, has to both adapt but also be strong enough to handle these phases. So I'd love each of you, Hernan, in your case, what did Mercado Libre get right that allowed you to pivot and you and Marcos move from entrepreneurial founders to the executives? Marcos is still CEO of Mercado Libre. Alexandra, in your case, taking these two brands in the U.S., but really from scratch, starting in your room, your basement, starting these in Latin America, keeping the culture strong as they're in that high growth mode. And then Dave, I'd love to hear you both from your own experience, but also investing. How you can tell early on, like what needs to get right at that startup phase to be able to handle those sort of scale up issues and roadblocks. So let's start with Hernan and work backwards.
I think that there's a phrase that we used a lot, and I think it reflects in a way what we did, and it was the way we looked at it was that growth was more about not so much about pressing harder the accelerator. It was more about releasing the foot from the brake. So really not running after next big idea, running after things that looked very attractive, but maintaining ourselves focused and finding what were the friction points that were in a way inhibiting growth at that time. And that's what the company did, and I think that the fact that we remained focused on what we started doing at the very beginning allowed us to really continue growing. Obviously, there are lots of challenges, and I think the biggest one is to grow with the organization. Because when you start the company, it's just 20 people, and it's very easy, and you are up to that task. But then when you have to manage 1,000, 2,000 employees, clearly the type of skill sets that you need to have are very different, and it's much more important what you can tell to the 20 people that report to you, so they can then tell that to each one of them, to the 20 people that report to them, and eventually spread out the message to the whole organization, rather than doing things by yourself. That was what we used to do at the beginning. And that's the biggest challenge that the company had. I think the company was successful at that, as I said, because it was focused, and also because it had a great team that could grow into new positions without changing the people involved, but just reshaping their responsibilities.
Yeah, I would say that it's interesting because the challenges that being an executive entrepreneur, it's very similar and it's very different from like a big company or a small company. I believe very much that building a company in a country like Brazil, in a region like Latin America, you need to go through different waves, right? And when I think about Google and Facebook, the first wave was for us to think about if the business model would make sense in Brazil. So I'll give you an example. When Google came to Brazil, they brought a new business model based on a very high quality service, free, and based on advertising, right? Which was like something absolutely new for Brazil. We didn't have any company really, operating that way. And the platform was all self-serve. And at some point I thought, Brazil doesn't have a culture of self-service, right? Everything, you always have someone like helping you to do some things, and and at the end of the day, when we start like implementing the platform, we just realized there was, Brazilians have this amazing thing, which is that, adapt to new technologies. And then we start seeing that, it was great to see how Brazilians start like, using Google and Facebook, is the same thing. I would say that the second phase is for you to really hire the people that will be able to scale the business. And I think this is one of the big differences that we have from a small company, right? We don't have the pressure of the money behind, right? You have cash, right? California is sending you money to open an office, to hire people. You can go and hire, people with, very good salaries. So I think the second phase is really for you to find the right people that will be able to scale when you know that the business will scale fast. Then the third phase is for you to really go to the market and start educating the market in terms of this new business model. That's pretty much what we try to do. I would say that Facebook right now, after 2 years, we are in the education phase, or the education wave, where we're going constantly to clients and we're going constantly to events like this to explain exactly how the business model works, which is like totally different. So it's a different challenge, but it's at the same time it's something that we need to focus and make sure that you get ready, because things will grow extremely fast, and you need to have the right background in order to continue pushing for this outstanding growth, just like we saw in both companies.
So I think in terms of growth, I prefer not to predict which companies are going to be successful and simply invest in a lot of them and hope that a few are successful.
What are your typical mistakes you see, though, at certain inflection points?
Mistakes are numerous. Many companies die more by suicide than by competition. We've made probably about 20 investments in Brazil so far. My partner, GEC, has made a Brazilian the last year and a half, 2 years. Probably furthest along right now is Zuckerberg, which recently raised a larger round of funding. But we think there's a lot of opportunity in the Brazilian market. Contrary to what previously has been discussed, and we're focusing on how do we get from maybe 2 people to 20 people, probably from 0 revenues to maybe $1 billion in revenue, largely in the first 2 years. And most of our focus for that growth is not going to be as much on direct sales and business development. It's going to be probably as much on online platforms. For right now, I would say, at least in the U.S., there's probably between 5 to 7 platforms that we focus on primarily. That's mostly Google for search, Facebook and Twitter in social, maybe to a lesser extent LinkedIn, YouTube in video, and then Apple and Android and mobile. Starting to look at other messaging platforms that might be interesting as well, and maybe some other platforms like Pinterest. Internationally, those are slightly different, but still mostly the same. In Brazil, probably seen a big overtake of Facebook over Orkut in maybe the last 2 years. It's changed quite considerably.
Chandra is there.
Yeah, exactly. I think WhatsApp is also a pretty strong platform here around SNS. Mobile platforms still emerging. There's some significant part of the population and huge potential there, but probably not as many smartphones as will be the case in 2 or 3 more years. So right now I'd say a lot of the focus is on using search and social platforms for distribution combined with maybe other lead gen and affiliate strategies. And I would say probably overlooked by a lot of people is YouTube as a really interesting emerging distribution platform. Most of the challenges right now really are trying to understand how you do monetization. So I wasn't really super happy when I saw that video and the guy said, I care a little bit less about monetization. Actually, we care a fuckload about monetization. That's really important in international geographies, particularly when we're investing maybe between $50,000 to $500,000 and trying to get that company to Series A. That's the biggest challenge in international geographies is really the lack of venture involvement or angel involvement at sub $2 million rounds. And so getting the company to even just survive long enough to get to maybe $1 million in revenue, some amount of break-even potential, or at least interesting usage where other folks like Kazak and other people will come in. So we sort of depend on the downstream investors to really take them to larger levels, but it's our job to maybe seed investors' jobs to get that first, 100,000 to $1 million in revenue rolling. Probably at least the first, million users on consumer platforms, maybe the first thousands of users on business platforms. But revenue is extremely important, and as much as we don't mind doing traditional self-service, traditional direct sales models, hopefully most of the opportunities really on using social and search platforms and the future mobile platforms.
So you mentioned venture capital, and I think that a number of the people here that are sponsoring global entrepreneurship weeks in their home countries are looking not just at inspiring individual entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, but in building these ecosystems. And a lot of times when people talk about building entrepreneurial ecosystems, they talk either about government regulation or they talk about institutional venture capital coming in. And what's interesting is, and through Endeavor's 15-year experience, what we've seen is, well, regulation is nice to have. It doesn't really deter entrepreneurs if there's not regulatory environment. We've had people come to it and say, we don't care if it takes 3 days, 30 days, or 300 days to establish a business, we're going to get our way around it. I think culture matters, and what we found to our surprise, as we've been mapping out these entrepreneurial ecosystems, the greatest accelerator is what you're part of, Dave, and what now are not part of here is the PayPal Mafia. Is the group that came from PayPal not only built a great company, but is now investing as entrepreneurs in the next generation. I think, Arnaud, what you and Nicolas and others have started to do, successful entrepreneurs becoming the super angels in times, like Mark Andreessen, institutional venture capitalists, but doing earlier stage investments, having been there, rolling up their sleeves. And so I guess the question for you, and then with Alexandra, we're also seeing more corporate venture arms coming in. So walk us through what these ecosystems around the world are going to look like if you don't have the traditional venture firms from Sand Hill Road knocking on your door if you're in a country they're not there. What can you do on the funding side to sort of stimulate entrepreneurship from a financing side? What's your recommendation and what's your own experience?
Well, I think seeing folks like Arnaud come out of Mercado Libre and really start investing. He's investing at the fund level, but even before that, I think seeing experienced operational entrepreneurs investing on an angel basis, that's probably what we hope for in a lot of these startup ecosystems. I think, I was very fortunate coming out of PayPal to have a little bit of money to get started. Not as much as maybe Reed and Peter, but put about $300,000 into 13 startups between 2004 and 2008. Most of those were small investments, maybe even as small as $5,000 to $10,000. But it was really helpful for me to start to learn about what investing is all about. Even though I had a pretty decent background from an engineering and marketing perspective to add value to the companies, I didn't know much at all about the angel investing world. And I think especially, again, internationally, that's the capital that we're missing as much as monetary capital is operational experience and mentorship. And so small checks plus experience matter as much as large checks with no experience. And seeing folks, come out of Mercado Libre in Brazil, come out of other places like InMobi or Flipkart in India, come out of other larger organizations in different places around the world. That's really what helps get people off the ground. And then starting to see other seed funds operationally, and I should also, Facebook executives as much as PayPal, I think Facebook and Google execs have been very helpful in bringing those companies along as well. But then seeing the seed fund activity, Monchis and other people in Brazil really help take the ball to the next level. I think that's what's very encouraging is seeing now not just accelerators and incubators, but the seed fund activity at the next stage starting to emerge in domestic markets, energy markets around the world.
So in our case, we're still in a very early stage in terms of a company investing in different companies. I'm talking about Facebook. So most of the investments that we have at this point is our investments, strategic investments, the Instagram deal, for example, that we had in California. But I wanted to give a different perspective also, just talking a little bit about Latin America as a region. I think we have a tremendous opportunity And but from one side, I think that we had this huge opportunity. There's probably no country like Brazil in terms of adopting new technologies. And you can see that from the growth that we saw in different products here. I'm not talking about Google and Facebook only. But on the other hand, we have a huge problem, which is education, right? I mean, if you think about how many engineers, how many people are coming from schools that know how to develop, how to write a code, and those kind of things. I mean, I think that we still live in this dilemma of having a tremendous opportunity from a market perspective. We're talking on the backstage that, just I think about Brazil alone. Brazil alone has 110 million people that don't use the internet, right? If we're talking about Latin America, we're talking about 300 million people, over 300 million people that don't use the internet yet. So there is a lot of opportunity in terms of what we can do, for the future. And what I would like to see, and probably, this kind of event maybe will help us and foster this discussion is, how can we have this culture that we see in the Silicon Valley coming more towards Latin America, right? If you see most of the VCs that are like doing a good job here, most of them, I'm not saying all of them, but most of them are coming from, from the United States or like some countries in Europe. Brazilians and Latins, for some reason, they don't have this mentality or this culture of, being an angel or investing in different companies, right? I mean, just like what Dave just mentioned now, I would love to see more people just like investing in small companies here. I think we have a great opportunity. We have people, super creative. Brazilians are entrepreneurs, Latins are entrepreneurs. And I think it's really a matter of like changing a little bit of the culture of the people that can invest and would like to invest, and also investing more in education, seeing more of those companies kind of bubbling up in the region. That's my perspective.
Clearly, less bureaucracy would help. Clearly, more capital would help. No questions around that. But I think that the most important factor is related to what Linda and Dave were saying at the beginning is we need more role models, we need more successful stories, we need more profitable investments in venture in Latin America. I think that is what really makes a big difference. We have in our portfolio many companies that are great, founded by great entrepreneurs, very committed, high IQ, everything that you can ask for. But sometimes those guys have not been exposed to the type of experiences that someone in Silicon Valley is exposed to on a daily basis, just because they go to Starbucks and they meet someone that has already created a company. And when we send those guys to the Silicon Valley and they spend there a couple of weeks and then they come back, they come a different person. Same commitment, same passion, same everything, but their aspiration is completely different. And I think that we need to try to build more on that. Those successful stories will attract more entrepreneurs, will make current entrepreneurs more ambitious in a positive way. We will certainly attract more capital into the industry. I think that is what's still missing. That's why we launched a fund. We think that there should be 20, 30 Mercado Libres in Latin America. So companies that started in a garage and went through the whole venture stages up to an IPO and then a successful public company. That's certainly what Endeavor is trying to do. Connect entrepreneurs so they can learn from each other, so they can gain the emphasis on working hard, on dreaming, of building something big. I think that's the most important link that is missing in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Obviously, there are many other things and everything has a part into it, but that is the one that we need to really work more on.
So this is for any of you. Dave mentioned mentorship. We believe very much in mentorship. You mentioned role models, very important. And I'm not sure which of you will take this on, because I know most of you, your experience is all in the tech space. But one of the things we find working in emerging markets is while there are these wonderful tech and internet innovators, there are so many others in more traditional industries where the next generation in the family that's taking a family business to a completely new level. They can have something that's 3 million, 5 million, it could be 50 million, 100 million, employ thousands of people. And yet we don't hear as much of those stories associated with entrepreneurship, nor in the US either. And so from any of you would like you to just jump out as people are trying to foster different types of role models, different types of high impact, high growth entrepreneurs, how we get those non-tech stories kind of out there and what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's challenging certainly because the tech offers you an opportunity of discontinuity, and when there's discontinuity, it's always easier to jump ahead of all the others that were doing something similar but with a different approach, with a different technology. Obviously, we're very focused on technology because of that. We think that technology is changing the way people do many things, and that offers opportunity for those that embrace that new technology instead of continue working on defending the old traditional way of doing things. But certainly there are opportunities to have innovation, and Starbucks is a clear example. Selling coffee, it's been around for centuries, and they created a business model out of that, and it's actually a venture-backed company, a very successful one. So certainly there are more opportunities there. I think opening capital markets and having more private equity investments in the region will help to highlight those non-tech stories. But it's a challenge. I think that clearly technology offers an opportunity, and the rest of the economy is less, it's more stable in a way, so it's more difficult for new developments.
I think in a lot of ways it's not as much about technology as it is about using the internet for customer acquisition and distribution. So in a lot of cases, the companies that are getting started now are e-commerce companies that are doing online marketing, or they're offline businesses where really the layer that's technology is really about 10 to 20% of the business, mostly on the distribution side. What I've kind of found interesting, certainly seen this in India, starting to see this in Brazil, seen it in Mexico definitely, is the existing family business that's been around for 20, 30, 50 years oftentimes is undergoing generational change, and the younger folks in that family who might be anywhere from 20 to 40 years old are looking for technology investment opportunities or looking to take business into technology, and they're actually the avenue to get into investment. And there's
I would say Endeavor's first course should be how to fire your mother-in-law gracefully.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some maybe cautions about working in that environment, but I think we're perhaps a little desperate for any capital availability whatsoever, and we'll take it, even with some caveats. So I think, we've started to see some interesting opportunities to work with, the younger generation of those family businesses who are active investors. They want to take the business into technology. They want to work with the seed and investment community. Maybe they want to work with people from the U.S. and other places. And I wouldn't underestimate that as the initial stage of investment where it's coming from, even though that may not be the most ideal scenario. The other thing that I think is really interesting about that is that may actually become the exit opportunity for a lot of these businesses. So in many cases, they're not pure technology plays, building search engines or browsers or robotics. They may be just doing software-based, mobile-based, web-based systems for internet ordering, and those startups are probably innovating and making competition with existing offline businesses. So it would seem like a natural partnership for those offline businesses where they see competition happening to invest in them, co-opt in them, and maybe even acquire them downstream.
No, very, very briefly, that's exactly the point I was going to mention. I think that this is a point of no return, right? I mean, I think that the companies, especially the new generations, will push, the older generations to think about, new technologies, innovation, even in the more traditional, industries. I think that we have one great example here in Brazil, which is Netshoes, right? Netshoes is an unbelievable company, very well managed, and it comes from a family that owned a shoe company for many, many, many years. And and the new generation, Márcio and his cousin, I mean, they're doing an unbelievable job, just like bringing this new technology and new and innovation to the company. But again, I mean, I just wanted to reinforce my point before. I think that that's our job to bring that discussion to Brazil and to Latin America in terms of how can we stimulate that discussion? How can we bring more of those cases? How can we use that, that understanding and that knowledge, to spread to new generations of more traditional companies? I think we have, Latin America is known as the region that, where, we have very good managers. We have, really, really good managers, and we have, some great examples of, big deals in the region, just because of the capacity of the management of our professionals in the region. But I think it's missing, that and that culture, that mentality, that if we bring technology, if we bring innovation, it's even more. I mean, this is going to make the region much more competitive. I think that's the only way that we will be more competitive, is if we bring this notion and this culture of innovation to the region. That's, my belief.
Well, let me go there. I mean, I get asked this a lot, whether we're going to see first-round innovations coming from the emerging markets and maybe even being replicated by the U.S. and Europe rather than the other way around. I think we've always had these mini innovations, and one of my favorite stories of Mercado Libre is that one of the reasons eBay wasn't going to work there is that no one trusted the equivalent of FedEx or UPS, so that you started having people go to cafes in Buenos Aires to actually see the goods and see the checks. So there are always adaptations, but are you now seeing sort of breakthrough innovations coming from Latin America and other emerging markets that we're going to see actually U.S. firms copying or adapting?
Yeah, certainly, when we invest, we look first for that model that you don't like that much, that is businesses that are solving local friction points. And I think that's important. If you want to do something global, even if you think you have the capabilities, it would be great if you can start in your backyard because there's something you're solving that someone else is not solving. So I've seen lots of innovation in the mining industry coming out of Chile. And that's great because then those guys are very close to the problem, are very ready to the problem, but then the solution they find works for Chilean companies and also for global companies out of Russia or the US or Canada. But I think that it's important to have something close to your home first to solve. To think that out of Latin America you can create the next Skype, which is so far the only good example of a tech company global that was created outside of the Silicon Valley, outside of the US. So I think it's a challenge to find those things, but eventually if local companies start solving things, like you mentioned, Netshoes. Netshoes is the largest sporting goods retailers in the world, online, in the world. I'm sure they do that better than many people in Europe, so eventually they might expand into Europe and do that, but they started solving something here that required local knowledge, but they require local means of payments, local distribution networks, local relationship with the suppliers, local everything. Then they found the secret sauce, and now you're thinking about expanding outside of Latin America. The same thing with opening, is a company invested in. That's a business that was created out of the blue. Yeah, English classes online sounds like very obvious, but there hasn't been yet a consolidated model behind education, even less so behind language education online. But these guys have figured out a way. The company is doing great. It's expanding throughout Latin America very successfully, and now they are considering moving that model into some European markets, into some Asian markets, and I think that they'll be very successful because they were very good at at solving that local friction point, and now they are looking into opportunities where they're going to find other challenges, but they have the secret sauce of a big part of the business model. So I think that's the model that should help us expand these ideas globally.
I think there's two things on this. One, there is local market innovation that happens that gets pushed back the other way. So you've seen that with gaming and social messaging in China, Korea, and Japan going elsewhere. We invested in a company called ZipDial out of India that's doing missed call marketing. So basically, they don't want to pay for the call. They use a phone call and then no one picks up as a way to provide different types of messaging depending on the number of calls, and then an SMS communication to confirm that. That model has also been used in other countries, I think to some extent Brazil, also in Africa as well. But at the same time, I would not worry too much about the cut and paste copy model. Frankly speaking, I think a lot of the models that do work internationally are based on very straightforward e-commerce models and other business models, which have been done in other places. And there's no shame in taking something that is successful in one market and bringing it to another. And there's certainly a lot of good things from an investment discipline practice in knowing that I don't have to reinvent necessarily the core business, but I probably do need to reinvent the marketing and adapt that to local culture. I may need to adapt that to local online platforms where the audience is primarily mobile and SMS instead of web-based, online at work. So there's, lots of things to do with existing business models that are successful in still adapting them to local markets, and there are going to be, local opportunities that are innovations that going back the other way. But, for Brazil and probably Mexico and the Latin American market, more generally speaking, it's a big market. And Brazil is 200 million people, Mexico is 100 million people, Spanish-speaking market is 300 to 400 million, overall Latin American market is 500 million people. Growth is through the roof in the middle class, mobile phone adoption is through the roof, e-commerce adoption, payments adoption, logistics and delivery is getting better, so you don't need to worry about going global. And the global opportunity here is really, in my opinion, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, the rest of the Spanish-speaking market. And that's a huge market to go after. So I think sometimes people in domestic market opportunities get caught up too much in going global right away and not taking advantage of 50 to 100 million user markets right in their back door.
That's an excellent point, and I just saw Dan Eisenberg, Professor Dan Eisenberg here before, who talks about this innovation, these mini innovations, and I think that local adaptation, I think what Mercado Libre did was genius throughout Latin America. What you're doing in Facebook, we were talking about, you're the only country in the world that had Orchid to actually had competition to overcome, and so I'm a big believer in that first. So two more questions. One is with Alexandra here, I can't not ask, what everyone's talking about in the U.S. is the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, who you worked with both at Google and Facebook. She was a college classmate of mine. And so basically Sheryl is talking about why there are not enough women executives and that women actually need to lean in. And I got thinking, when you look at the entrepreneurial context, in the U.S., only 8% of companies that are venture-backed are led by female entrepreneurs. And we've done, in Endeavor, I would say we have 18% of our portfolio, including one of my favorite stories here in Brazil, run by Leila and Zika, these two sister-in-laws. Beleza Natural is now an $80 million company that employs over 1,500 people, started from scratch here in Rio. But it's been challenging, especially in the tech area, to get more women. So are any of your investing companies, women, what are you doing both in a company standpoint and an investment standpoint to make sure that they're represented too, especially here in Latin America where it's hard to do the parenting, the family, and the business. So Alexandra?
Yeah, well, of course, we discussed a lot about the issue inside the company. Sheryl has been very vocal, not only spreading her beliefs to the public in general, but also bringing that discussion inside the company. I think that one of the most interesting things that is happening after she launched the book is that she brought up a discussion that we didn't hear before. Right? I mean, I think that if she can think about a legacy right now is the fact that everybody's talking about that. I mean, there is a lot. I mean, there is no one right answer. There's a lot of people thinking one thing, a lot of people thinking another thing. But I think just like the fact that she's bringing the discussion in terms of what to do with women. And I'm a father of 3 daughters, right? So I need to believe that they will have a much better world in terms of professional life, what they can ask in terms of her profession and things like that. So practically,
a study came out, by the way, that male executives that have daughters pay their female employees more.
You see, maybe. Well, there are a lot of statistics, very interesting statistics, right? Anyways, one thing very practical that we're doing now is we're creating those women's group in different regions. So we just launched our women group in Latin America, and basically what they're trying to do, they're trying to just bring a lot of discussions in terms of how they can develop, for example, engineers, right? I mean, how can we help hire women engineers, for example, to work with a company in the U.S. or how can they stimulate education? How can just like share information from different good like the best cases outside of the company. So this is one thing. It's a very small thing that we're doing, but I think it helps to bring up to bubble up the discussion about like how we can foster women in their professional life. But that's pretty much what we're doing now.
Certainly, in our case, because that's the industry is structured, there are more male entrepreneurs than female. Though we have a company, I think there are somewhere around here. It's OKSG.com.br. It's led by 3 women, great entrepreneurs. So hopefully they'll join the Endeavor family eventually and be part of the role modeling that we need, not only for entrepreneurs in general, but also for women to become entrepreneurs, for them to demonstrate that they have lots of things to offer. I'm also a father of 2 daughters, so I cheer for that.
We're probably more women-friendly founders outside Brazil than in Brazil right now. Only one company out of 20, although the woman who leads our investments here told me that she's working on more. In an overall portfolio, I'd say it's probably between 15 to 20% female. So we've invested, I believe, about 75 women founders and co-founders, maybe a little bit over 100 if we count co-founders. Here, so far, just Winnipeg is the one that has women founders on it. But certainly looking for more.
All right, so we'll have this panel in 3 years and we'll check back and see.
Exactly.
All right, so let's give each of you the floor for the last few minutes. You have representatives of, I'm told, 120 companies here. They're trying to generate an entrepreneurial culture, an entrepreneurial ecosystem in their countries. I'd love each of you to take the last couple minutes and just give your advice or any sort of closing thoughts you have. So, Dave?
I mentioned this before. I think one of the biggest challenges on the early stage ecosystem is not so much focusing on the entry point and government subsidies and incentives to get more funds off the ground, but really looking at the exit market conditions and figuring out ways to create liquidity opportunities. That's really been what I think is our biggest challenge and concern in starting out in international markets is just a lack of M&A history for small-scale exits. And I think that's probably a solvable problem through a couple different methods. One is trying to get later-stage investors to earmark a percentage of their investments at Series A and B and C to provide liquidity for early-stage investors, government and tax incentives for making exit opportunities easier, and then getting corporates involved, maybe also as ways to fuel liquidity opportunities. I think on the initial side, again, the biggest opportunity is really getting angel investors who have mentorship and experience operationally going. And then probably on the investment discipline side, I think looking at revenue-oriented opportunities initially, although in the long run, capital-intensive stuff that's maybe not revenue-focused has the biggest potential return. I think as you're getting these ecosystems started, you want to see revenue-oriented companies that really can show sustainability in case of a lack of funding market, and also are attractive, again, for the M&A opportunities based on customers and revenue, not just based on kind of usage models.
Oh, it's a long list. I mean, I think you have everything.
They're taking notes.
Yeah. So what I would just add to today's list is I think it's very, very important to focus on like who you're hiring and just really make sure that when you think about how you can scale your business, if you're bringing the right people in the beginning. One of the things that I learned after working with companies like Google and Facebook, I mean the process of hiring is so exhaustive. Sometimes people go through 10 interviews, 15 interviews. But we want to make sure that we are, just bringing people that will help us build the right culture, and also bringing people that is, it's not afraid of really, working hard to scale a business, since the beginning. A lot of people that started with us, in the beginning, coming from school, for example, like very junior, really believed in the project, really believed in the opportunity for growth, and now they're ready to just like scale as a manager, like having more people. So I would say, besides everything that they mentioned, and also like all of the worries and concerns about, how the tax structure works in a country like Brazil and how, the complexity of our labor legislation, those kind of things that we were discussing, before. I think it's really important for you to focus on the right people in the beginning so that you can really, scale the business.
I think building on the people side of the answer, I think it's very important to focus on the right people, on the right entrepreneurs. If you find someone that you think can really be eventually the CEO of a very large company with lots of vision and innovation, but also lots of execution capabilities, and that bet on that person, help them be successful. I think that if you can accomplish that, then the spread effect that will have on any ecosystem will be very, very significant. So as investors now, we've seen several companies, and what we end up finding that is the most important factor for success is the DNA of the entrepreneur. If he or she has what it takes to really drive the vision, adapt to changes, execute, chances of success increase significantly. If the entrepreneur is okay and is pursuing an amazing idea, that usually doesn't work. So certainly good ideas help, capital help, lots of things help, but at the end about the entrepreneurs. So we're trying to find those entrepreneurs and help them be successful. If you do that, the rest of the ecosystem will go after it.
Well, I was just thinking back to one of my first times in Rio. It was 1998. It never had just gotten started. And I was literally known throughout Latin America as La Chica Loca for assuming that entrepreneurship could take hold in the region. And at that time, the words emprendedorismo weren't even really operating. An empresario had this idea of this businessman who got rich off government contracts and had all his money in Switzerland. It wasn't associated with the innovation, the emprendedorismo that we see now. And I was just with Maria Roca, the founder of Endeavor Brazil. She and Beto Zampiro took a bet on this idea, this model. It's incredible to see now what's happening in Brazil, less than 15 years later, in really every industry, and you see these incredible role models coming out of Latin America, like you or Nan. We're giving back in so many ways, as mentors, as investors, as using this operational capital that you developed. And so what I say to all of you is, if you don't believe it can really take off where you are now, it really only takes a short time. So congratulations to Global Entrepreneurship Congress, Jonathan Ortmans, and everybody here today. Thank you very much.